All right, folks, we are going to be kicking off today's presentation of Take More Control of Your Now AI Platform instance with the ServiceNow Security Center. Couple of things just to mention real quick is if you have any questions, if you go to the More menu in the Zoom window, you'll see that there's a Q&A there, and you can go in there and enter any questions that you might have. Also, we record these sessions every time we do them, and we typically have a link that we can share. We don't have that link today, but if you check back onto the community in about a week, we will have that link up there. You'll be able to go through. You'll be able to, watch the video at your watch the recording at your leisure. Share it with whoever you want, and take advantage of some of the information we're going to be sharing today. So I'm going to kick off with a quick safe harbor so that everyone can see this. There's some stuff. There's going to be some new stuff that we'll be talking about because there's going to be things that are going to be happening that we're going to need to address. So one thing with Safe Harbor is don't really make any forward decisions with going through when you go through a presentation. So don't make any purchasing plans based on anything that we say in these. Make sure you sit down and you're talking to your team about what you're going to get out of the product, specifically when you purchase that, because any forward-looking statements, they may not be available in what you're buying, and we don't want you buying because of that stuff. There's enough value in the platform. So a little bit about myself. My name is Joe Pizzo. I've been with the company for 7 years. Um, I previously worked in a solutions consultant role on the security and operations team. Prior to joining ServiceNow, I worked through various companies over my 25 plus year career in technology. I know that's probably dating me, but I've worked in threat intelligence, I've worked in incident response, I've worked in forensics, I've worked in authentication, so many different areas of the industry. I've been here, like I said, for 7 years, and now I'm on the customer security and trust team. And what we do on this team is we provide guidance, tools, learning events for our customers so that they can take control of their environments and operate in a more secure environment so that they feel more confident putting their most valuable possessions into ServiceNow. We want you to really take advantage of the stuff that you're paying for. So take advantage of the great AI, the Gen AI and the agentic AI that's available to you because you have this data in here. Might as well use it. So one thing I like to point out is through 2025, more than 99% of cloud breaches will be traced back to misconfigurations and mistakes made by end users. I like to use this as a mic drop point because this is something that's really important for our customers to really think about. And because we operate as a PaaS, a SaaS, and infrastructure as a service. We do so many different things. We are a cloud provider. So we provide all these tools to make sure that you have all of this rich, powerful workflow that you can use to really take control of the data that you're storing here. So we want to make sure that you're protecting it. And what we're going to be focusing today on is Security Center. And a big part, probably the biggest part of Security Center, is understanding how you can configure ServiceNow to be more secure so that you have more trust in the platform. So a couple of things I like to bring up. First, there is a responsibility for all of us. So as a company, we have responsibility for our co-location where we're putting our systems. So that would include things like regulatory and legal compliance, physical security, and environmental controls. Things like making sure that we're vetting our employees to make sure that they are not people who would tamper with anything that might be there. We also have responsibilities for the physical systems that we're hosting all of your instances on. So we have to make sure that those are up to date and those vulnerabilities are patched and there's data encryption out there. We have a secure SDLC process. We do penetration testing against our stuff. We manage our vulnerabilities, we manage our privacy and so on. But there are also responsibilities for you, the customer. So when we break this down, there's a lot of things the customer has to think about. Now, you might see some overlap, but what we're doing is we're basically responsible for what we're serving to you, and you are responsible for what you are creating in the AI platform, right? So it's really a big deal to think about this, and we want to get our customers closer to securing their instances based on the things that they're doing with the platform. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please put a question into the Q&A and I can respond to that. So a couple of things that I want to point out. And this is where you can really just get started with security before you jump right in. First is our core compliance portal, and that's where you can go and find information to support your audits, your assessment requirements, being able to grab that information and take advantage of that. There's also the security best practices guide. It's a simple guide for going through security things that you would really need to consider to protect your instance. And it's going to coach you on these, and it's going to have different areas and different domains where you're going to be able to focus. Then there's security contacts. I can't stress this enough. This is where my customers, when I sit down and they say, "Hey, how come I don't know about Security Center?" And we have security people that ask this, and they're like, we just thought we were just putting data up there to, handle like, problem outages and stuff like that. And when I say to them, well, are you working with your teams that manage your ServiceNow infrastructure, and do they have your information? And they'll say, well, it should be up there. And I can see contact information for these customers, and I can tell you that they're not included in a mailing list, or they have the wrong mailing list up there. So take advantage of this. If you choose to scan only one of these QR codes, take advantage of the security contacts. Get that information updated so that in the event that something happens, or there's a notice that security needs to be aware of, or there's a vulnerability, we're not immune to stuff like that, and we need to alert you to that. Get that information updated. Make sure that either the primary contact is there, or make sure that you have a mailing list or a distribution list up there so that when something happens, and it will, we can notify you. All right, let's keep going. So, one of the things that I get asked a lot is, what is Security Center? How do I get to Security Center? What is it going to do for me? And when we break this down, we want to make sure that our customers are doing the best to harden their instances against any threats, make sure that they are following along with best practices so that they're always ahead of the game, and they're getting notified of suspicious behaviors that occur. So there's a lot of things that can really address with this stuff. So first, we have security hardening. This is where we can go and set those configuration settings that matter to us the most. This is where I can go and flip some switches. I can enter some text. I can, do a yes or no on some of these. I can include things like IP addresses if I want to have like blacklist, whitelist. My security metrics is where I can go and identify what's happening in my instance and check in on these KPIs that are associated with specific security functions. Scanner puts some power into my hands so that admins can go out and they can scan against a set of security checks for any misconfigurations or insecure behavior. This is actually pretty powerful. So if we think about it, triple des has been deprecated in password 2 fields. You might want to go out and identify which password 2 fields are out there that are using triple des, that you need to go out and switch that over and get rid of the triple des functionality and include other optional functionalities. Security learning is where you can find out more about not just the platform, but about the industry and about how to use different products securely. And it'll cover different ideas and different domains, and that'll give you that basis of your where you're going to learn and create that knowledge that you can build on. Best practices is where we have that crawl, walk, run behavior, where we can go and see what's going on in our environment, where are we starting, where do we need to go next, and how do we really take advantage of things moving forward. So I'm going to skip to the next slide. And right now, when we break this down, so this is one of the top customer concerns. When I look at my customers and I go out and I look at their SEC filings, when we look at their annual filings, we always see that security is up there in the top. And we're really embracing that for our customers because we want our customers to jump in and understand what they can do to help. Now, we also have a whole team that will answer questions and they'll host different things and they'll get on with customers and they'll work with customers so that they understand what they need to do beyond just Security Center. Security Center is a fantastic place to start and continue, but there's also some stuff that we really need to think about so that we can take advantage of understanding where we need to go next with security. Maybe I need to go into advanced encryption, and that's where our OCISO team will come in. So when we break this down, we have those same functions that we actually mentioned earlier, and we really want our customers to get started on this journey and to understand that to start on this, there is no additional cost. If you are on Utah or above, you have access to Security Center. If you are on Vancouver and above, it is part of your instance. It is by default included. And this takes the place of the previously available instance Security Center. Now we're using ServiceNow Security Center. So we want to point that out a little bit so that you know what you're looking at. There are some resources on here for documentation, Now Learning training. So if you go up to Now University, you'll be able to see different training classes that are available on Security Center. And it'll walk you through all of the features and how to use them so that you can better take advantage of it. Because I can only show so much in a 45 minute to an hour demo, right? And we're 20 minutes in already. So I can show so much, but really if you go and take one of these 1 or 2 hour training classes, they will get you way, way ahead of what a simple 1 hour meeting will do or what a call will happen with the OCISO team. This can really be a great place for you to start if you spent the time and put it in there. There's also a video library, and I'm going to point out that if you find my voice to be relaxing and dull and kind of like taking a sleeping pill, that video library will be right up there. You put it on at night, you'll hear my voice, and I'll lull you to sleep with some quick videos on how to use the product, what to do with the product, what to expect from the product. And these are all moving forward, right? So there's going to be things that we're constantly updating for the latest version of Yokohama, for the upcoming version of Zurich, things that we're going to be doing when we get to the next series of the alphabet, right? We'll be able to go and take advantage of those. And then again, we have that security best practices guide so that you can go and take advantage of that, read that, link to that, go through that documentation so that you can really jump in and understand what's happening there. Okay, so one of the biggest questions I get when I mention that this is part of when this is part of the product, the first thing everyone says to me is, all right, great. Where is it? How do I get to it? What am I looking for? So I try to include these screenshots so we understand that if we go in, the first step on the security journey is to really access the application, right? So I want you to jump in, go to your filter navigator, type in Security Center, and you'll see that listed. You'll see Security Center pop up there. You can also add it to your favorites. So once you add it to your favorites, you'll have it in your favorites menu. If you used it before, if you go to your history menu, it'll appear in your recent history if you've recently used it. But the best place to really go for me is to go to admin and then go to Security Center. So this way you can see exactly what's happening there and you can jump right in and take advantage of that. So when we basically get into it, we really want to talk about why this is important. And this is important because we want our customers to really understand that we're doing everything that we can and we're constantly evolving the tools, the guidance, the services that we offer in order for our customers to really be able to jump in and secure their instances. I don't want anyone to be intimidated by security. I want them to be able to jump in and I want them to take advantage of this. So I'm going to end the show now and I'm going to jump into the actual instance itself or my instance itself and walk you through a demo. So I have a couple of tabs up here preloaded. I've logged in. I can see some information. I'm in my Yokohama demo. And one thing I really want to do is I want to go in and check to make sure I'm on the latest version. So first place I'm going to go is I'm going to type all available applications, and then I'm going to go to all. And this is going to take me to what we used to call our plugins menu. So we can go in and we can see exactly what's going on in our environment, and we can see exactly what we have installed, where we are, do we need to update and stuff like that. This is really powerful when it comes down to what we need to address here. So I can come in and I can find that I do have Security Center installed. I can see that I have an up-to-date version. That's what it's telling me right now. But if I sync this and I go and I click through, we can see that there'll be versions that we can even update to. It'll tell us what we have and what we can go to next. So this puts us in a really powerful position so we can see exactly what's going on. And this is where we can walk through and start taking advantage of some of the latest features. And one of the things that we do throughout the years, we'll update this twice a year. So with this twice a year, we'll be able to go through and we'll be able to see everything that's out there. We'll be able to go through and track what's going on. We'll be able to see exactly what's updated. We can see what's been embedded and stuff like that. So we can really take advantage of what we're identifying it throughout here. So this puts us in a really powerful place. This gives us information about anything that's been installed, including a log, and then it'll give us any details around what happened so that we can go and we can take advantage of this. So we can see exactly what's going on. We can see exactly where it stands. We can really move forward and understand what's going on here. So this puts us in that power position. And Application Manager and all available applications is a great place for us to go and actually understand what's going on across the product, across the platform itself, so we can see what's happening with the platform. And do we have other things that we need to plan for updates? Now, that leads us to another part of the conversation is planning for updates. I may not be ready to go and update right now because I haven't tested. And that leads us into how do we use this? Joe, where should I put this? Where should I turn it on? What should I do? That's my second question that I get. And I typically try to avoid with my customers going in and updating things in production. So this is where I can go through and I can see exactly what's happening in my production environment without having to make any changes. What I do is I coach my customers to install this into a sub-prod environment. And then what they can do is they can take their update sets, or they can just mimic and copy over what changes they made, and they can go and allow these things to occur. So when I'm in a position where I need to stay on top of this with my family updates, I'll get the update, but I'll also have two updates that occur throughout the year. Altogether, it's four updates if we include the family updates. So when Zurich comes out, that's going to have a new series of updates as well. But 3 months after that, Zurich will have an update to the application, and we'll do the same thing over and over again. So I really can't suggest this in a strong enough manner, but put this into your subprod and get working on it right away so that you have the ability to make sure that you're ahead of the game. There are constantly added new features, and sometimes there are things that are changed. So there might be hardening settings that will be removed because it's no longer it's now part of the platform that setting is embedded in, and it's no longer something that needs to be configured. It's something that's secure by default. So let's jump into the product. I just said something that I like to focus on, and that's secured by default. And we're going to talk about that in about a second. But right now, when I go to Security Center, this is the landing page that I'm taken to. I have my additional resources here over on the right side, and this gives me cloud security customer resources, security videos, shared security model where we can go and see things like that. Or I can click on more key resources, and more key resources takes me into our learning and references page. This was mentioned earlier, but this is where we can go in and see things like encryption and key management, or we can go through and we can identify, like, what do we have to worry about it for HIPAA controls, or for, Singapore, or, GDPR and stuff like that. We can see that information. We can gather that. This puts us in a position where we can learn a lot about the product. We can also see security fixes that have occurred with versions. We can see App Center, Security Center release notes for the apps. So we can track all of that and have that available to us. It really gives us a great place to understand and gather the documentation that we would need to really understand what's happening. Now, once we get in, we start seeing some bird's eye view of things. So we have some tasks that have been assigned. We can see what's going on for my instance itself. And we can see that I have some customer actions. I have some best practices that have been completed. I have some hardening compliance score stuff that's showing me right out of the gate. And I'm at an 88, which I think is pretty good. That's going to be subjective to my customers. So some of you might think a 75 is great. Others might need to get to 100. So there are things that we can do to raise that score or to maintain consistent security. We also have access to some of our consoles, and our consoles are where we group things together to basically identify what's happening there. So this is where we can see our configuration console, our monitoring console, and our posture console. And there are other menus and navigable areas where we can go and jump in. We also have our tools. Our tools are mapped to our console. So this is where we can go and go right to the tools that we want. So I can go to my hardening score comparison, my security scanner, my customer actions. If we go to monitoring, we can see we can go directly to the links in monitoring. And then for our posture control, this will take us to the links that we see in posture. Now, one thing I really like to point out is when we go in and we jump into our posture, we'll be able to see things like what score we have. And I thought I had that opened already. But what I can do here is I can take us into the posture console, and from the posture console, we can jump right in and we can see exactly where our score is. So here we are in the posture console, and we can see exactly what's happening here. And this is telling us some information about our dashboard. It's giving us a bird's eye view of what best practices have been done. But if we go right into our security posture dashboard itself, we can see from a bird's eye view that we have information about our compliance score. And this information shows us where we started, where we took a dip, and then where we are at a certain point. Like, where are we right now? And this gives us all of this great information. It also gives us some information about our metric thresholds. It gives us information about customer actions that we need to take advantage of. It shows us some information about user metrics and login protection, and then privileged users and REST APIs that are being used. It also shows us our top recommended hardening settings that we need to go out and adjust. And right now we're doing pretty well because we just have a few highs and a moderate that we can go into. We can see some trending. We can see some data protection using data classification. We can go and classify this data. So we have this bird's eye view of all this data. Now, one thing I want to point out is that this compliance score of 88 is tied to this score impact number here. So let's jump into hardening so we can see exactly what's going on there. So here is the security configuration console, and this is where we find the hardening, the scanning, and the customer actions. Now, some of these are going to be more important than others. I think that hardening and scanning are two of the most important parts of the product. So we want to go through and identify that we have this score here. We can see exactly what's going on with our scores changing. We can see what's happening with our scanning and how many scans have identified actions that need to be taken. And then we can see customer actions. But really, we want to get into security hardening itself so we can drill down and take advantage of the information that we have here. Now, immediately we met with that hardening score, and we're in right now. We are in our hardening all settings. This is where we can go and make those changes. Now we're looking at everything, and we see a bunch of criticals and a bunch of highs, and that's how things are organized right now. But one thing I want to point out, because I mentioned it before, is secure by default. Now, our numbers for secure by default are pretty freaking great. So, over 85% of all of our hardening settings, and the hardening settings that we have in total are 217, are turned on or secure by default. That's over 85%. If we look at our compliance out of the box for our criticals, it's over 95% of our criticals are set to be secure by default. So let's go and take a look at what we don't have set right now. So let's turn off empty and turn off compliant. Just show us the non-compliance. So in our non-compliant, we have a couple of highs, some moderates, and then we have some things that are low. that we can really take advantage of. And we can even filter and sort on these by just clicking. So we'll be able to see exactly what's happening. We can see what our lows are. We can see our moderates and so on. But I like to start at the top with highs and then anything beyond that. So we have a lot of moderates, and those are things that we can really take advantage of. And the reason why I do this is because when I talk to my customers about configurations, or we talk to them about like policies that they might have applied, if they're using our configuration compliance product, they're looking at what's failed for scans. So a scanner can go out and look for all these configurations, and they'll come back and give you a list of failures. When I look at things that aren't set, I think about them the way I think about a compliance scan, where a compliance scan will tell you if something is open or closed. And open means it's a failure. Closed is means that it's passed. And that's where we can go and track it. Now, realistically, these are things that we really need to go and take advantage of. So if we look at this, out of 217, I have 32 that are set to be non-compliant. But what I've done is I focused on my criticals, and I focused largely on my highs to be able to turn things on and off so I'm getting the highest impact possible. If I think about this the way I think about vulnerabilities, I want to focus on my critical vulnerabilities. I want to focus on my high vulnerabilities, and then I want to focus on my moderate, mediums, and below, because the criticals and highs are probably of the highest probability of being exploited. And we see those things happen all the time. We see this happen in the wild, left and right. So here's where we can go in and we can do things to be able to change certain behaviors. So if we take disable inbound emails for locked out users, for example, we can go in here and we can see all of the information about this. So this is where we can see something that it was compliant, and now it's non-compliant. So this is something that was reset over time. So this is where we'd want to go out and we want to say, hey, this is something that this needs to be set to false. And this is where we have that toggle switch where we can go in and we can click on that. And when we click on this and update this, we'll see that this goes from non-compliant in red to compliant in green. And this tells me that this specific setting will disable inbound emails for a locked out user. That means that if I fat finger my password and I'm locked out, that I can't just send inbound emails from my account into ServiceNow, which I think is pretty important, because if I'm a locked out user and I can go and interact with the platform in any way, it's going to make it so that I really need to I need to be authenticated to do that. So if I'm disabled when I'm locked out, I'm not authenticated. I want to make sure that I am authenticated. We also have some information about the description and what it does. So this is where it just sets a specific glide record, and it sets it to true. There may be information disclosure as an inbound email would be received by users with locked accounts, right? This is pretty important. We also want to see if there's a functional impact. The functional impact is where we've tested this and we've done the research to say we've exhausted our capabilities to understand if this is going to have a functional impact on how the ServiceNow AI platform works, right? So if we don't have a functional impact in there, that doesn't mean that one doesn't exist. It means that we've exhausted our settings and our resources, and we expect you to test this. And that's why when I talk about testing this, you put this into a sub-prod environment and you start turning these on one at a time, taking some notes, have your UAT group go through and just make sure that they're functioning with the applications that they're using. And then you can go and take that and promote that up into your production environment, or promote your sub-prod into your production environment. So this is where we have the ability to set these. And if we go back to our all settings, this is where we're going to be able to see that certain things have modified, that we now have one less setting that needs to be adjusted. And if I go through this and I spend my time making sure that there's no functional impact on my instance, then I'll be able to know that I can promote this up into my prod and make sure that we're staying on target with everything that's happening out there. And we can also see that our score went up by 1%. And that's because of that score impact. And that score impact is between 0 and 1. So anything over 50% is going to increase that number. Anything under, we might need to go and set two of these in order to increase that number. But this is going to put us into a more powerful position. We can also see some trend information, and the trend information is going to give us a place where we can go through and identify exactly what's happening. So we can take advantage of what's been happening over a period of time so that when we go through, we can identify, do we really care about this? Do we really worry about this? Is this something that's going to impact us? Is this something that's going to, let us be operating a more secure environment so that we can see exactly what's happening. So this puts us in a really powerful position. It also gives us some information about trends that says, hey, this is what your score was on this time, and we can see how many settings you have. So we can track all of that so we can see exactly what's going on. We can see that yesterday we had 32 settings, now we have 31 settings. So we're actually decreasing our number down, but we can see that we've fluctuated a little bit. Maybe we've done some research to say, hey, you know what? We don't need these. We have compensating controls in place that we don't need to worry about this. And then our score comparison is where we can configure our score from one day to the next. So I can come in here and I can say, well, what did it look like on August 1st compared to September 1st? And it's going to come back and give me that score, or even look at today and see what's going on with today so that we can track all this and measure this and see what's happening. It really puts us in a powerful place to be able to take advantage of a lot of things that are going on in our environment. So this is where we can go and see what happened, what changed. We've only had one high change, and we've only had one that was access control, and we can see that it's disable inbound emails for locked out users, and that's what I've changed from that date to today. So it's pretty interesting to be able to see that and track that and hand that over to your managers, to your CISO, and say, hey, we have this, we're doing this, we're working on this, and we can track exactly what changes have occurred. So you have that ability to back up what's going on in your environment. Now, one thing I want to point out is I mentioned those videos before, and those videos with my lovely voice, they also pop up in here. So when I go to a new screen, I'll have a video that's going to walk me through that specific tool. So I can keep this, turn this on or turn it off. I keep it on for demonstration purposes just to show it. But when we talk about scanner, we want to talk about a couple of things. So first we have checks, and checks are individual checks that occur in the environment. So we can see all of the checks that exist here. And I can go through and I can say, hey, I want to go and create a new check. And I have an unlimited number of checks that I can create because I have this ability to create a new table check, column check, script check, or linter check. A linter check could look for something that could be considered potentially malicious in practice. So maybe someone wrote a script and didn't include a check for an ACL. And we need to have that check for an ACL to see who has permissions for that. So that's where we can go and see exactly what's happening there. But these checks are included in suites, so that when we go and create a suite, I can go through and create a suite for something like triple des. And this is that triple des that I mentioned earlier, where we want to go out and we want to check our entire environment for triple des usage in password two fields and password two fields with short KMF format. So once we have this, I can go and kick this off and I can start running targeted scans to address specific information. Now, I can also go into my results and I can see my results and track these down. And this is where we'll be able to go through and see them based on the specific script, based on the specific suite that I ran. And we can see that we have this triple des in here. So this is where I can go through and I can look at my specific scan findings and we can see exactly where these findings exist. And this puts me in a position where I can go through and I can start taking advantage of what's going on in this environment. Now, results are grouped together. Findings are a la carte. Findings are where we can go and see exactly what's happening. And this is going to give me something where it's going to tell me exactly where we're finding that information in that specific script so we can identify stuff that's really important to us, and it puts us in a power position. I can also go through, and once I have these findings, we can grab these and we can start doing some work with them. So if I grab this finding, I can jump in and I can create a new task and I can set this task, or I can create a task here. Now, this task does not integrate today with ITSM, but that's coming in the future. Where if I create a new task in Security Center, it'll bounce over to ITSM and it'll give those users an ability to go and build out their tasks. But here I can create a task, and in this task, I can include all of the information that's included with this, including the resolution details that's available for this. So I can go and take this, copy this information, paste this here, and include information on what they need to do, and or I can just fat finger everything. And take all this information out, delete that, keep that information in there as well, so that we can track everything that's happening here and know what's happening. I can also go and assign this to a specific assignment group, and we can give this to any group that's out there that we would really want to go and manage this information. So this puts us in a position where we can track changes that are occurring. Now, one thing that I like to point out, because when we went through this and we talked about the checks and we talked about the results, this is where we can go through and I can say, hey, you know what? I did this triple des, but can I fix this someplace that makes it easier? And I can go right into my customer actions, and we can see that we have 4 that are still remaining. And I can go into my triple des, and we've already run the scan. So we've taken advantage of the scan, and we've run this. We've gone through all of the steps, and we have an actual series of options that we can go and take advantage of. We can go through and do a complete or partial, and we can go and grab this here and click on that link, and then we can go through and say, yeah, let's make sure that it's that this is something that we're gonna take advantage of and save this, so that we know that we created this, so that we know that we addressed this problem in our instance. Really pretty cool stuff. So let's jump in and let's look at our Security Center security monitoring stuff. I want to check time because we have about 18 minutes left. So I want to make sure that I'm using my time most appropriately and getting to everything we need to get to. In security monitoring, we can see if we have anything that's here. We have some metrics that are available. This is a pretty new instance, so I don't have any event notifications. I don't have any thresholds, but we can go in and look at event notifications, and I can go through and I can see where I can go and set off notifications. This is all inside of Security Center. So these notifications aren't going to anything outside of Security Center, but we're also working with notification engines to kick off notification engine in platform to kick off some of this. And we have some people who are building some pretty interesting AI bots that are going out and taking this information and saying, hey, let's monitor for these specific changes and send them out. I think that's a pretty interesting use case. When we go into metrics, metrics is where we can go in and see what's going on in our environment. So we can see how many metrics, key metrics, metrics with targets, and so on, and track all of this information. I can see any metrics that are specific to me, and this will track everything that I'm looking at. And we can see that we have some stuff like security elevations, logins, and stuff like that, where we can track what's happening. But what I really like to go into is users. So when we look at the user metrics, we can see everything that's going on with our users and successful logins, external logins, local logins not protected by MFA. This is something that should really concern me at this point, where I should be able to go in there and say, well, why is that fluctuating so much? Who's logging in that doesn't have MFA? Users not logged in, it's in the last 6 months, and we can see that that's actually growing over time. And that's pretty big. It's a pretty big deal. I can also go in and look at my privileged users, and we can see things like any inactive, any logged out, any users that in any privileged users not protected by MFA. This is where we should really be focusing on this, because if I have privileged users that aren't using MFA, this is something that I think we really need to address. So this puts us in a place where we can see exactly what's going on. And I'll do email as well, just to see if there's anything that we've picked up there so we can see what's happening. If we look at things like data classification and best practices, we get specific information about those, and it's going to drill into it. Now, this number here correlates to the count below each of these. So I can go into completed overall and we can track exactly what's happening for all of these that are completed. And we can see exactly what's happening in that environment. And then completed by maturity level gives us another view of all this. So we can really take advantage of this stuff. Next is our posture console, and this is where we talked about our posture dashboard. But I'd like to go into best practices, and I'd like to talk a little bit about what this does for you here. Now, in best practices, this is where we have our crawl, walk, run. And in our case, it's build a foundation, enhance the experience, and then optimize for functionality. Now, some of these are where we really can go in and we can start grabbing things like using strong passwords, right? So I can go into strong passwords and we can start looking at the steps to see exactly what's going on. So here we can see what password policies are out there and navigate to that. We can set a specific password strength so that we know exactly what we want to do. Most of my customers will use custom and they'll use something like, 8+ characters, and they'll use minimum uppercase, minimum lowercase, numeric character, special character, and they'll have MFA turned on so that they have the something you have and the something you know to log in. So that this way they have more of they have a stronger security posture when it comes to password management. We can also go through and set fields in the password policy form and then finally test our passwords. And this one's closed, so we'll be able to see exactly what's happening here and we can start tracking what's going on. And best practices really puts us in a great place to really jumpstart. If you're new to ServiceNow, this is where you can go and take advantage of this stuff. And this is really powerful stuff. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. We talked about our posture dashboards, hardening score comparison. We talked about that earlier. And finally, I typically like to close when we go into our security center learning and references. And I know I touched on this earlier, but this is something where I can take someone who's relatively new to the platform or relatively new to security and steer them down a path to really understand how to manage Security Center. And this puts them in a place where they can go and take advantage of what they really need to learn in order to make sure that the data that they're putting it into a place that they trust. And that's really ultimately what we want you to do. We want our customers to know that they can trust ServiceNow and trust themselves to really make sure that they're operating in a secure environment. So that there's a lot that goes into this. There's a lot that really happens. And we want to protect ourselves. We don't want to become the victim of our own erroneous behavior. And that's where a lot of this comes into place because, as we mentioned in that first slide, most of these are going to be tied back to, bad configurations. And if we can fix those configurations, we can reduce the potential of any breaches that might occur. And I think that's pretty cool. So I'm going to jump back into my deck and we'll close out here because realistically, I think that this is something that we can really talk about here. So when we break this down, and we break down security center benefits, we want to think about the increased security posture, compliance, sticking to compliance and making sure that we're there and we're compliant, monitoring for potential threats so that we can avoid those breaches, understand the resources available so that our basic teams can get out there and start learning and moving really fast, and then address customer options and follow best practice. The goal of this is to increase the trust and confidence in the ServiceNow AI platform. So you can really take advantage of this and really use the product to understand what your next step should be. When we break this down, we want you to know that it's part of platform. It's there. Navigate to your filter navigator, type in Security Center, go to your admin menu, hit Security Center. It'll take you right there. This will improve your organization's security posture using best practices and built-in security recommendations. In fact, when we look at metrics, we have one metric in there for failed logins. And we have a customer who came to us and said, hey, this really, saved our skin one day when we noticed on a Wednesday at 2 a.m. we had tens of thousands of failed logins. And there was nothing that happened because they were using strong passwords and MFA. But when they notified their security people, they started checking other resources, and there were other resources that weren't as successful at preventing this. So they were able to start doing work immediately and reduce their impact. So a simple password, spray and pray attack can really do a lot of damage. But we're picking this up because we're preventing it. So I think that's a pretty interesting story to tell. System admins can leverage detailed learning resources to gain more control of your ServiceNow instance, and we have all of these available. We will be sharing those links so that you have that, so that you can go and take advantage of this. Thank you for taking the time. I know it's not easy jumping in to an event the day after a long weekend. I do appreciate everyone joining. I can't thank you enough. If you need to get in touch with us, you can reach out to your account team and they can put in an OCISO request and they can request my time, Joe Pizzo. They can request my partner team's time. That's the office of the CISO. And we can get on and we can walk you through whatever you need.